A Beautiful Death, A Beautiful Grief. You know, Cheryl, these books are so meaningful and they've really helped me a great deal. I was wondering if you'd share your story with us, the story behind them.
I'd love to. The writing started with A Beautiful Death, and I never really thought about writing a book. I've always written a lot, but mostly for work. But it was when my husband Stephen was diagnosed with terminal colon cancer that I actually had a vision that we had an ongoing mission. Stephen's part was to go on, and my part was to stay and tell the story. And I had been journaling some already, just to kind of keep myself balanced because he'd been sick for a while. But once I had this vision that I have to record everything, so I wrote everything down as it was happening. And that eventually became A Beautiful Death. When I started, I had a huge pile of journals and a great editor that helped me really tell the story. But that's how it came about.
That is really amazing. I mean, it's almost like it was a planned event in your lives, or it was something that you thought would bring meaning and kind of define your relationship.
In a way, it did. It actually did. As a matter of fact, when we first found out that Stephen's cancer was terminal, I mean, as you can imagine, it's totally shocking when you get that kind of a diagnosis.
And you were so young.
I know, he was very young. And the first thing you think of is, why us? And what happened actually in that first weekend, we sat together, and at a certain point it became, why not us? And it was almost that we had decided to do this ahead of time.
That's an incredible breakthrough.
It was an agreement that we made, and that why not us really changed our whole experience, because we had another 2.5 years. And he was healthy, he was going to work. It really wasn't until the last 6 months that he really went downhill. But I was journaling the whole time about everything that happened, and that why not us made all the difference. And I think it makes the difference in this book because I don't shortchange anything. I don't,
No.
Everything is there. I knew I had to be honest, and it's not gruesome, but I also don't leave anything out because I wanted people to understand that, number one, you can do this. When you're faced with this kind of a diagnosis, you can do it. And the way that you really do it is to be present with every single moment and realize that even though it may not feel like it, you probably have been prepared. You probably do have the resources, internal and external, and that's what we realized that we had.
That's what I found so amazing about your book, is that it gives people such dignity in the sense that everything has meaning. It's not just the happy endings, that you think you're going to have, but it's everything that happens to you. And the journaling that you've done, when I was reading A Beautiful Death, it was just breathtaking. Every single chapter really meant a lot to me. And I think, who hasn't lost someone? We've all lost someone.
Yes, we have. We have. And it's interesting, even though we published A Beautiful Death in 2010 and A Beautiful Grief in 2012, I still run into people all the time that are suffering from some kind of loss. And one of the things that I'm still able to do for people is to normalize what feels so incredibly abnormal.
Right.
Because we're so modern, we're so disconnected from really the beginning of life and especially the end of life that we don't know how to do it. We don't know.
Absolutely right.
We don't know how to be with the end of life. And Stephen was really my teacher in a lot of ways because he took this as his ultimate spiritual initiation.
Amazing.
And so, I mean, he went through a lot, and probably more than he ever told me, but he was very intent on living his life to the full. I mean, there's a book by Ira Byock, who is a master teacher in palliative care and end-of-life care, and it's called Dying Well. And Stephen really did that. He was intent on being present with what was going on with him. Towards the end, he even told me, he said, my body is afraid of dying, but my soul is so excited about where it's going.
That's incredible.
And it was incredible that he was actually able to differentiate and live with both experiences. Because I think what happens to a lot of people is their body is afraid. And that's actually good. You know, we want the body to fight for its own life.
Right.
And Stephen's body did. He was still young and healthy. I mean, except for the fact that he was dying of colon cancer, he was very healthy. But a lot of people, you know, they get caught in the fear and the isolation that happens when you're leaving this plane. It's can be a very frightening, lonely kind of place.
So he must have really been like a teacher for you through this process in a way.
Yeah, he really was. For one thing, he wanted no pity. You know, one time I said to him, "Oh, my poor Stephen," and he said, "Don't call me poor." He said, "I am not poor." And it was the dignity, with which he faced the end of his life. And that's what I really tried to capture in A Beautiful Death. And I think the fact that it was my journaling, that I was journaling as it went, I never could have remembered everything that was in this book. And I couldn't have remembered it in the sequence. When I went back through the journals, there was a lot of repetition.
That's what makes this so unique, Cheryl. It's like even though you were totally emotionally present, you were able to capture it for other people, to really help other people as well.
Yeah. And I just wrote what was going on. And this is a book not about a beautiful death. This is a book of a beautiful death.
Exactly.
That you're actually in it. And I think that's one thing that makes the story so powerful.
Completely. It's just amazing. I was wondering, are these two books, I know for me they were perfect together, but are they for different audiences, or how would you teach people about that?
You know, it kind of depends on the person. A Beautiful Grief came the year after I published A Beautiful Death. And as it happened, I had advertised A Beautiful Death on Psychology Today, and they offered me a blog on their website. So I was doing a blog, and we called it A Beautiful Grief. So A Beautiful Grief is actually a collection of 24 blog articles that I wrote, and I added a new beginning and a new ending. But there's separate articles, so it's more of a bedside book, you know, that people can just open it. It's sort of an inspirational book. There's an internal sequence to it, but it's not obvious, and you don't have to read it in sequence. What I tell people, and I've learned this over the years, that if someone tells me that they've suffered a loss, maybe a spouse or, God forbid, a child or a sibling, I ask them a little bit about the situation, but I usually recommend A Beautiful Grief.
I see.
Because it's about the grief process. And that's really what they're in now. They're in the grief process. The book about Stephen dying and our experience and the love story can sometimes be too much for people.
Who are right in the process.
They're right in it.
I
so
see.
A Beautiful Grief is a little bit more removed. And so you can read one short article at a time. That being said, I've heard from women in particular who have lost their husband. And I remember this one woman wrote to me and she said, "I read A Beautiful Death as my husband was dying."
Oh my goodness.
And she said, "Your book really helped me." And I thought, well, that's kind of what happened to me, because I read Ira Byock's book on dying well, and I read this wonderful book called Final Gifts, written by two hospice nurses. And they talk a lot about what goes on with the person who's dying. You know, especially when they're actively dying and they may be seeing loved ones.
Right.
And my father did that. I mean, when my father was dying, he was, reaching up and waving and talking to people. He was in a coma. And if you don't understand what's going on, a lot of times family members and even some caregivers will say, "Oh, that's not true. You're just hallucinating," which is actually really painful for the person who's dying.
Because it's their experience and it's so real.
It's so real. It's so real. And so when Stephen got to that point, we were actually able to play in that space.
Oh, that is beautiful.
Yeah, it was a couple of nights, because he did slip into a coma at the end, but I think the night before, 2 nights before, he was in that space between worlds. And because I had read these books, I understood it.
You could be with them.
I could be with him, and we played. My background in theater is improv. And so we just improved.
Oh, that's incredible.
And I even had this experience that I had been reading for him for quite a while, because he couldn't read anymore. And we were doing really pretty well, but at one point he said to me very intently, he said, "What do the signs say?"
Oh my goodness.
And he was seeing signs.
He was seeing real signs.
He was seeing real signs.
And he was in his process.
He was in his process, but I couldn't see them, of course. And I felt really bad because I'd been doing great until that point. And he had been kind of agitated. We finally got him settled down that night. And we had his hospital bed next to our bed, so I could keep an eye on him, but so I didn't disturb him. Anyway, when I got in my bed, and laid down and put my head on the pillow, closed my eyes, I saw the signs.
You did?
I did. And there were all these people, it looked like they were from Central Casting, because they were old people and young people, big people, little people, and even their costumes were from different periods of history.
Oh.
But every single one of them was holding up a placard, big white sign, and it said, "Welcome, Stephen Eckel."
Really? That's incredible.
And I told him, I said, "Honey, I see the signs. It's the welcome committee. They know you're coming." And he said, "Oh, like Ellis Island?" And I said, "Yeah, but
that's amazing.
They know how to spell your name here."
That's absolutely amazing.
So that was part of our experience.
These are just such precious experiences for people so that they can be open to what's happening with their family, their loved ones.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful that you were able to write this down, Cheryl.
Yeah. And that's really the point, is to be open. This is not a how-to. This is not how you should do death, because
Right.
I mean, my mother's passing, I always said I was really glad I wrote A Beautiful Death first, because her passing was not beautiful. It was really difficult. She was afraid, and so every passing is different.
Oh, that is such a great point.
And the point is to be open as you can be
To what's ever in front of you.
to what's in front of you, and especially for the person who is dying, so that you're not interfering with their process. So that's what we did. And A Beautiful Grief is sort of the follow-on. And, one thing people can do is, I, several years ago, did a radio interview about A Beautiful Death, and there's a whole bunch of clips on my website that I excerpted.
Great.
So if you're not sure, you can go look at those.
Go right
you can
to
go
the
look at those
website.
clips, yeah, and see some of the other things that I said about A Beautiful Death, and that may be enough.
One's the story, one's the process.
Exactly. And I guess the final thing I would say about A Beautiful Death is, it's the book to read before you need it.
Oh,
If you or people in your family are really, they don't want to talk about death, they don't want to, pretend it's not going to happen, it's going to happen. Nobody gets out of this world alive, that we know of. And so read A Beautiful Death as a way to understand more what goes on in the process, because it's a story.
exactly.
And the thing is, the story is the help.
I thought so. It
Yeah.
meant a great deal to me, and I know it will to others.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cheryl.